So what a week it was. You know what we have to talk about this week.
No, what? Tell me. First we have to get on top of a building. But yes,
Okay,
yes we do.
find our way
Yes, we
on
do
top
have to
of the
talk
building.
about something or another.
Perhaps a hospital or something? Hey,
Get in your car.
Can you summon a helicopter? All right, get my car.
Helicopter. Yeah, that's a good idea. Wait,
Get a
hold
helicopter.
on. I will get a helicopter.
It's enough for two. I won't summon my own.
You will summon your own?
No. If you're only gonna get a one-person helicopter, I'll summon my own.
Well, if I can even remember what the helicopter's called. What's it called? X2 Phantom, is that it?
I don't know.
I don't remember what it's called. It's like... oh, crap. What's it called? I'm looking, and I am looking. We'll do the X2 Phantom. It's got to be something like... No, that's the car. Maybe I can't summon.
All right, I've got one called helicopter. Let's try that one.
Yeah, do that. That sounds like a helicopter, so summon that. I've been playing the Saints Row 4 for so long now. I'm used to that one where you just jump and fly. Here you can't.
I have actually been able to see you online doing Saints Row 4.
Here you just jump. You can't fly, and it's kind of a nuisance. All right, take us to a rooftop.
I kind of like these things.
What, the helicopters?
All right.
Oh, they're big
I like
fun.
these vehicles and so forth. Yeah.
They're big fun.
Make sure you get the school bus. Where's the school bus?
Where's the school bus?
Alright. Now. Is there a hospital somewhere this way?
I don't care. Just a building. Doesn't matter to me.
Alright.
Unless you had to go to a hospital.
It would be appropriate.
It would, wouldn't it? It would be poetic justice sort of thing. But any building's fine by me. So, where are you going to set us here?
Did you go all the way down?
I forgot that I'm not in Saints Row 4.
Alright, hang on.
I was going to, fly out, and I didn't fly out, and now I'm stuck on the side of the building like an idiot.
Jump down all the way to the ground.
Whee!
Coming down.
Oh my gosh, unbelievable. Here we go. Okay, I'm here. I'm on a building, so this'll count. Where are you? There you are.
I'm landing.
Way over the corner. Yeah, Saints Row 4 is a trip because you have all these superpowers, right? And so you just go around the city causing massive amounts of mayhem and carnage. Wait, you didn't just jump off, did you?
No, I didn't. I just crashed the helicopter on the other side, though. Come take a look.
Oh, yeah, no, that's probably not a good landing. No, lungs gonna explode. Nice.
Pretty good landing.
Yeah,
Apart
sure.
from that,
Yeah, then you can walk away from, right?
You know, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
That's what somebody said.
Can't possibly, solve a pandemic without creating a few hundred extra viruses that you're going to spread loose.
Yeah, right.
Because I'm just saying, apparently that could happen,
Yes, as a hypothetical. I was very amused to see Dr. John Campbell lose his cool to a certain degree and then recover it and do a really kind of funny video that ended with Shakespeare. That was pretty good.
He's always very, very dry.
Yeah.
Very, very dry about his humor. I thought that was actually quite funny.
It was funny.
If it weren't, it is really horrible.
Yeah.
But it's also funny that the guy was caught so red-handed. If you're out on a date, that's actually when you're the most unguarded and most likely to say the truth, as opposed to when you've got all your lawyers backing you up and telling you what to say.
Well, the guy's an idiot, first off. Okay, he's an idiot.
But he's also the director of RNA research.
But he's also the director of RNA research, yeah. And that seems to be proven. That seems to be the case. And it seems as though he was very willing to tell to his date that they were doing certain nefarious things. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The they.
So the thing that amazes me too is that just the attitude of a person like that, the willingness to take the risk to talk about what you're doing, as opposed to being closed-mouthed even about corporate secrets.
Yeah.
I mean, nefarious or not, that's so reckless to do that.
Terribly reckless. But I see, this is the thing that occurred to me when I was watching that video, the undercover video. I wonder whether or not those guys have operated for so long with a certain recklessness that, certain impunity, that they've gotten really reckless in their attitude towards it in general. I mean, you can tell me probably better than anybody, but is it normal for a scientific group of people to just become kind of isolated from reality, from the real world, from other people, because they're doing the research all the time with the same folks? Is that kind of normal?
Actually, no. No, it's actually not normal.
Okay.
Very grounded in practicality. You do like day to day, here's the job we have to solve, what are the practical things we need to solve this job, what's the price you can actually pay in order to get this stuff, should we do it now, should we do it later? This is all really almost kind of dull in a sense, in its ordinariness of how you do it.
Yeah.
The only place I ever lived where people grew really out of touch with reality was when I was a professor teaching biochemistry.
Yeah.
My colleagues, some of them were really out of touch. One of them who I'm not saying that germs are bad, but he was absolutely a germaphobe about it. And a person who's doing biology and chemistry, I think they'd have a little bit better of a grounding of what the real risks are.
Do you think that's because of the general insular nature of academia, or do you think that's because this guy had read a great deal of doomsday literature and had become more phobic than is normal?
You mean my colleague, or the guy we were watching on video?
No, your colleague.
A little bit of both, to tell you the truth. He'd always been insulated from real consequences to stuff, and that gave him no ability to distinguish between a genuinely dangerous threat and a not dangerous threat.
So everything was just a threat.
Yeah, as if every threat is equal.
See, that's interesting because I think
some threats are not equal to others.
Yeah, all threats are equal, but some are more equal than others. I think that in academics, what I have found in academics is that generally speaking, academic types are insulated from the RW that most people have to live through. They're they think only in terms of the discipline that they've been doing, and then whatever cause they've taken, their cause celeb, And what they don't really, most of them don't seem to realize is that the majority of people don't live their lives that way, and whatever ism it is that they've latched onto is probably only magnified because they've latched onto it.
Yeah. Whereas if you stepped away from those hallowed halls, it doesn't really count as much as the fact that eggs are up to $6 a dozen.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. It's a far greater crisis than the fact that we're all going to get slammed by some asteroid or, decimated by something else.
No, I've had to go through safety seminars in real world, rather, where the whole point was how to prioritize the danger level so that you are picking the appropriate response.
It's
how can you simplify this down so that even if your mind is panicking, you can just go through and say, these are the important points.
See, that's interesting. That's really interesting to me because I know they do similar things in military and in EMS responders. They take them through these scenarios and then they take them through actually practice of these scenarios so that in the actual situation, they're able to have a sort of rote memory, like muscle memory, to respond to the thing. And then it doesn't become as much of a threat. It's not a big deal. The guy's choking. What do? The pulmonary artery needs to be compressed or whatever it is. That's really interesting. Now, without revealing anything necessarily about your employer, do you think that it is then with the guy who got interviewed? Do you think that it is unusual or is it normal for somebody to go out and tell state secrets on the lam in public?
That, as I say, is so unbelievably reckless.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I also have to say, because I mentioned this about corporate secrets, virtually every place in the world, especially the ones that are dealing with multi-billion-dollar projects, actually have it written in the contract. You will not say this if you are out dealing with other people.
So are they?
The guy's the director.
What's that?
The guy, as the director, has to have explained this contract to many people several times over, and yet he's so reckless that he doesn't do it himself.
Right.
That kind of suggests that he hasn't been enforcing it for other people as well.
Or
and that's a culture of recklessness.
Yeah, or else it's a thing where they've all gotten so they think they're getting away with murder literally, and so they're not concerned anymore. It's not a big deal. They don't think they're going to get caught. You know, kind of like the serial killer or something.
Who's been doing it for a while, so that you just think, hey, this is a game now. I'll never get caught.
But why would he? This is weird to me. Why do you think he would say it? Okay, we got to put the cards on the table here. Why do you think he'd say it to a gay lover, a potential gay lover? Because he says when in the secondary interview where he is confronted, he says he was just trying to impress his date. Well, why that sort of thing? I mean, is this? I don't know. Maybe I'm naive. I don't think that's the sort of thing that would impress, first off, and I don't think you'd be using that as a corporate secret to impress, unless there's something else that I'm missing.
No, I actually think that you might, Will, especially with certain people who also are, if you're out with a person, you spotted that they're also kind of a risk taker of a person, and you knew that you were working on the coolest, most valuable project in the entire world, I mean, that you were the director of it. Yes, I actually can see you bragging about it, because the other person you're with likes risk and would find it cool.
Now that's a very good point, and I know we're skirting kind of around an issue here because it is a family program, so to speak, but the lifestyle of certain people seems to be much more prone to risk in a lot of ways, and living riskily and getting into risk is sort of getting off on it in a way, you know, almost like, look at me, I'm dancing on a razor's edge. If that's the case, right, if that's the case,
yeah,
then his taking the risk of revealing, as you said, one of the biggest, most important scams or shams or whatever going on, whatever it is, it would be a risk, and it's a risk that he's revealing it with to somebody he doesn't even hardly know. So I can see that.
I mean, especially if that's a first date too. That's amazing that you would say that you'd be so cavalier with what you're doing. I mean, even if it wasn't this particular secret, even if it wasn't about the poke.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it could have been about something else.
Talk about corporate secrets
no.
to a stranger.
No. And honestly, by the way, on that, when he gets confronted and he goes ballistic, I thought, well, of course this guy's scared, because corporate doesn't take kindly to secrets being revealed. In other words, this guy just signed his death sentence.
No.
You know?
Figuratively, at the very least, he certainly could not keep his job or ever be employed by another pharmaceutical corporation.
That's right out. That's right out. But even just his physical life. I mean, the people have been killed for this. It's a potential huge danger, and I wonder if the thrill of that danger. I mean, why, revealing the thing in the first place wouldn't be that much of a danger if there wasn't already danger. You know, the risk isn't risky unless there's risk. So, there it is.
$100 billion profit a year, which is what that particular product was worth. There are people that do kill for $100 billion per year.
They do tend to.
Yeah.
Yes. So
I've heard of it happening.
So then,
no, I'm not saying that would necessarily happen in his case, though. I would think that he's more likely to be fired and left to go live in a rotten apartment in the middle of New York for the rest of his life.
I hope whatever his consequences are, they aren't too severe. I really do, on the one hand, because I don't mean ill necessarily to anyone. Well, most people anyway. Maybe a Charles Schwab or two, but generally speaking, I don't wish ill to anybody. So
try not to, at any rate.
Yeah, right, exactly. But with this guy, I hope that it isn't anything more severe than that, being cashiered from his job. Now, to the things themselves, of course, what did he say in the video, right?
Yes.
I don't need to go through all the details. Sorry?
Well, it comes down to the question about whether or not those details are plausible.
Okay, yeah, that's the next thing. What did he say? Don't have to go through every single one of the details, but he did seem to make the claim, from what I gathered, that they were, first off, they were reinfecting monkeys in order to try and get the most lethal strains, and that they were genetically mutating the virus to make it more lethal in general, and that this thing, even if it didn't work, was going to be a cash cow for years to come for the corporation. So they were making money off of people suffering in misery. That's the general gist of it. Did I miss anything?
Not really. That thing about monkeys is definitely the modern way of doing mutagenesis in viruses and bacteria as well, because you get nature to take care of the selection for what you want. If you do this back and forth reinfection with viruses, you don't have to do the artificial, they call it in vitro versions of mutagenesis, since you get what you want.
Okay, so explain with your scientific brain the difference between mutagenesis and in vitro.
Okay, mutagenesis is where you're changing the genes by some means or other. Since the 1970s, with the advent of a technique that's called PCR, which is a great technique, there came the ability to take the gene at the DNA or the RNA level out of the organism that it was in, and then artificially change the sequence in certain either specific spots or randomly throughout sections, and then reclone it back into an organism like the one it came from. And then you'd see whether or not what you just produced had the properties you wanted it to have. And this is the in vitro method is what this is called. And it's called in vitro because a lot of it is done in glassware.
I see.
That's what in vitro means. In vitro is Latin for glass.
Okay.
But somebody figured out at one point with this serial reinfection that if you had the right starting point for a virus or a protein, and you knew what the property you wanted in the end would be, that you could infect a monkey or a mouse or a bat or something, get some level of that property you wanted, and then take the virus you extracted from the first organism and infect a whole slew of other ones, and pick the one out of the whole slew that has closer to the properties you want. Extract the virus again, go back and infect another slew of animals, and you get closer and closer to the property you want.
Okay.
It's a lot like domesticating a wild animal.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. It's exactly what I was going to say. Isn't this the same thing that you did when you were breeding sheep, for instance, or when you were creating dogs initially?
In principle, it's not actually that different.
Yeah,
in principle,
right.
Now, I'm not going to get into some parts because it does get a lot too technical, but there are certain stages in between when you're extracting it, when you are going to do artificial work to it.
Okay.
Like in vitro work to it. But it actually is not in principle that different from breeding sheep or dogs.
Okay.
It just happens on a much faster time scale.
Okay, and so is this related to the term gain of function? Because my understanding is that when you do something like breed dogs, you are breeding them in order to gain a certain function from the dog. So like a dachshund, for instance, is bred in order to hunt ducks, in order to hunt badgers. It's a badger dog.
Badgers, yeah. It is one form.
Okay, of gain of function.
Of gain of function work.
Okay.
The artificial way I told you about is also a form of gain of function.
In vitro.
But in this particular case, with the virus, you're doing gain of function specifically to make it more potent as a virus. There's a lot of gain of function work that's actually very good work.
Right,
but
sure,
if you're doing it to make a virus more viral, you're weaponizing it.
Well, yeah, that's the question. The next question that would come from this is, what would be the point of doing this? I mean, weaponizing, yeah, sure. His claim seems to have been that they were doing it in order to find out, in order to prepare for, or no, this is, let me back up. This is the corporation's response in order to try and do damage control. They sent out this letter afterwards, and they said that they were doing this in order to prepare for the inevitable mutation of the virus down the road. Does that sound any more than bullshit to you?
That sounds like complete bullshit to me.
Okay.
Among other things, if you're actually doing it in monkeys, you're doing it in a horrendously expensive way. Whereas you can do this with simulations of where the mutations are most probable.
Interesting.
Because not all portions of a viral genome mutate at the same rate. And by studying what has happened, you can figure out what's most likely to start changing. And then with modern computational power, you can generate the 3D image of the proteins that will probably be used to a fairly high degree accuracy.
Yeah.
And you can do this cheaply. Whereas if you're doing it by reinfecting bats back and forth, you've got to kill the bats.
Yeah, no, they wouldn't live. They wouldn't live for it.
Well, even if they don't, you've got to kill them and then incinerate the bodies afterwards. It's very expensive to run any kind of animal facility, as compared to the in silico, if I can keep using Latin terms, version of doing it on the computer.
Yeah, in silico. I am actually, to be as a side note, I'm actually really surprised that the animal rights groups have not latched onto this and say, what the hell, Yeah, we thought we had done away with this infection, but who knows?
I wish I could say I was surprised, but they only seem to protest when talking about cosmetic.
Yeah, I think most of them have been...
It's bad enough that the cosmetics do it.
Yeah, on little bunnies. I think that they've probably been infected. They have probably been infected or infiltrated themselves with a certain political ideology that will go unmentioned. But there it is. So
and the greed factor.
Yeah, and the greed factor. Yes, because there is that. So let me ask you this: if, for instance, they were doing this in America, this is illegal in America, is it not?
Yes, this would be illegal in America.
Gain of function
is what they were doing at Boston University, as was revealed a couple months ago.
Okay.
It is illegal.
Gain of function itself is not illegal, but gain of function on viruses?
Actually, I'm not a legal expert on how far that goes.
Okay.
There are the gain of function in weaponizing viruses. I know that one is illegal.
Yeah,
Likewise with bacteria, if you're going for anything that's more lethal, I know that's illegal.
Okay.
But if you are looking for something that's going to bind heavy metals and then be flushed out of the bloodstream afterwards, that actually could be done.
Okay.
As a way of detoxifying a person, for example.
Okay. So what possible reason would this corporation be doing gain of function on a virus to make it more lethal? What possible reason could they have for doing this?
Gonna be honest, I cannot think of anything that isn't nefarious about it, doing it with a virus. If you were trying to create a vaccine in advance of what you thought the next wave would be, then you would do it by the computer modeling first. It's totally how you do it. But if you're doing it in reality, the only explanations that I can come up with have to do with the creation of bioweapons or the creation of plagues so that you will have the only thing, the medication for people.
Shit.
I cannot think of another reason.
His admission that the vaccines that they have so far distributed have been very lucrative for them. It does not give me a great deal of confidence that that's not what they were trying to do. Develop something that only they can control.
In fact, it has been very lucrative. $95 billion last year.
Yes, it has.
How much that company made.
That's what I'm saying. Do you have the proof? The proof is in the pudding. In other words, there's proof that if, who knows whether the first one was absolutely created by human beings, but my suspicions are so high on that one. If you had a virus that was then supposedly taken care of by a vaccine that only you were distributing, you would make buku bucks on that vaccine. So if that vaccine was running out in terms of its popularity, shall we say, because of certain side effects, maybe what you need is a new virus, which can only be done with this. But then again, okay, that even raises something else for me, because this is going to sound totally ludicrous perhaps, but if, for instance, you have to have all the secrecy to hide the gain of function BS that they're doing, why create a virus at all? Why not just call the same virus by another name and say, well, the old vaccine is not going to work anymore, so we need the new vaccine?
against a new... actually, it would be very easy to find out with the new virus where its origins came from. That actually could be done by somebody in their garage.
Okay. So they would need a new...
So you could not hide it.
So you would need a new virus in order to promulgate a new vaccine.
Yeah.
Shitters.
And coming up with a new vaccine would be really tough. I mean, viruses may seem simple, but they are so elegant in the way that they actually...
But Benjamin, this...
in fact, reproduce.
I'm sorry, but Cardinal, this takes... I'll edit that out later. But Cardinal, this seems to take me back to a question, too, which is, was the original vaccine even really a vaccine? Okay? Dr. John Campbell, God bless him, explained the difference to me between the mRNA vaccines and what are called normal vaccines. But maybe you could perhaps take a moment and explain what is the difference between a normal vaccine and this bullshit that's been poking everybody and causing all these problems.
Yeah, I can explain it, and I can also explain why originally I had reservations against the mRNA technology, and then I got talked out of them, and then I came back to them.
Okay, please.
So, if you're going to do an ordinary vaccine, the tried and true method, the way that's been found that actually works, is to take a virus and to kill the virus and break up its little proteins and its little nucleic acid into little chunks, right? And then you package that up inside a little ball of fat, that's what they call the lipid nanoparticle. And you can inject that into a person.
Okay.
And their body will find the T cell, the little T cells that are in your body will see these little parts after it's torn open the lipid nanoparticle. It sees all these parts here. And there's a lot of ways that your body can recognize these as not human. If you like, I can get into how that's done.
A foreign contaminant.
Outrageously good.
Yeah, right. A foreign
your
contaminant.
body's really quite good.
Okay, so body's good at getting rid of all those foreign contaminants, and that's how we develop these antibodies.
Yes, you've got cells that have a gene that scrambles its own DNA until it creates an antibody against the foreign contaminant.
Okay.
It's an astounding system how it can do that. But you've got that.
Yeah.
Now, they can do this because they see this foreign material. We got it. Fine. But it doesn't need that much material. You do need something that's called an adjuvant to go in with the dead virus, because that stimulates your immune system to do this with a very small amount of material being injected. Does that make sense so far?
Yep.
All right, that's the traditional way. The way that the mRNA things work is that they will go in and they actually do cause some of your cells to produce, the cells themselves, to produce this foreign agent. And your immune system can recognize the foreign agent, yada, 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 and creates antibodies against it. But these foreign agents are actually incorporated as part of your cell. Like, for example, with the spike protein, it might then be found on the surface of one of your cells because your cell has produced it.
Okay.
Now, with an ordinary vaccine, if you get this shot in your arm, overwhelmingly the response stays in your arm, but if it does go anywhere else in your body, it's fine. Your immune system is going to recognize it anywhere in the body and just attack the foreign agent. But with the mRNAs, it's going to attack the cell that is producing the foreign agent. Now, if this just stayed in your arm, you'd have swelling in your arm, and you'd be unhappy, and that would go away. But if by chance it went through your circulatory system and some of this mRNA got incorporated through your liver cells, and your liver started to produce the spike protein, then your immune system would recognize these liver cells as being foreign agents.
Damn.
And you would get some attack against your own liver cells as well. Or perhaps you might, I think it's improbable, but if, say, it happened with nerve cells, and then your immune system would attack your own nervous system out of this. That's improbable, but it could happen. Do you see?
I do.
It all is predicated on whether it leaves the injection site in the first place.
Yeah. And so if I can put it in another way, tell me if this is correct. Right now, there's no way to actually focus the mRNA to remain in only one spot in the body. It has a tendency to leak out, so to speak, and go to other cells. Is that
Well,
correct?
yes, and in fact, for the mRNA technology, where it's being used really quite well, that's the whole point. It's supposed to. It's a very good technology for say fighting cancer. It works well for that, or for providing a function to a person whose cells are deficient.
Ah.
It actually can do that.
So you
Um,
program the mRNA, for instance, in order to latch on to, recognize, and destroy cancer cells.
yeah,
Is that kind of right?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and that works in some cases better than what we think of as normal chemotherapy.
That's kind of cool. So as itself, mRNA is not necessarily a threat. This mRNA that's supposed to produce spike proteins, however, seems to produce spike proteins in other parts of the body that then get attacked. And correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to infect the heart in a great many people. Is that
Well, it could infect anywhere, but yes, there certainly was the evidence for that.
okay?
And by the way, I'm not saying that this specifically is what happened. This is a plausible mechanism for how it might
Sure.
distribute to other tissues when suddenly get attacked.
Sure.
I do have to say that the German autopsies on the diet of myocardia were pretty definitive.
Yes.
That this was going straight to the heart.
Yes, that's what I gathered from Campbell's revelations. That he certainly seemed to indicate that the Germans approved that this was going to the heart. Now, the Germans also seemed to approve that there was scarring on the heart. Is the scarring where the body attacked the spike proteins?
I'm sorry, your audio clicked out for just a second. It's back now, but can you
Okay.
say that again?
The Germans seemed to indicate there was scarring on the heart. Is the scarring where the spike proteins were attacked by the body?
Probably. It's certainly something that caused the tissue there to die. Necrosis,
Right.
or it is one way that can happen, but that's not necessarily because of the immune system. Apoptosis is from the immune system, and that is a classic way your body will fight against a virus, is to cause the cells to undergo what's called apoptosis, or programmed cell death. And if your cells have a virus that's replicating inside the cell, your body can actually trigger this process called apoptosis, so that the cell dies instead of becomes a source for new viruses to come out.
So like,
That's connected to mitochondria too, which is why you'll see some mitochondrial damage in people that have viruses or
okay, so then, there's been all these reports of people collapsing and having heart attacks, et cetera, and some folks are saying that those are isolated cases and that they've only been amplified by fearmongers on one side of the political fence in order to support an anti-vax position. Do you think that there is actually evidence that this is becoming much more prominent, this heart attack?
Certainly there's enough evidence that it has to be looked at more carefully before this particular product goes any further.
Yeah.
Any other pharmaceutical product will that showed even 100 adverse events, you would put it on pause and check why are you getting those 100. Is it something specific for those 100 people, or is it something that we've overlooked?
Or the,
But if you're having like 1 in 10,000 that are showing an event out of this, you do have to, as a producer of these things, you do have to actually find out what is the mechanism that's causing it in that 1 out of 10,000.
Yeah.
Because it could be far more universal.
Yeah, and that's a pretty high level, to be honest. It's a pretty high level for the distribution of a product on this scale.
Well, for a vaccine, it's very high.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Do you, now, we've talked about how you've had medical problems, and of course our sisters have medical problems, and other people we know have had medical problems. Do you see other medical problems that you have a high suspicion could be tied to this this phenomenon, so to speak?
I have been reading up a lot lately on viral damage to the mitochondria inside cells. This is an area which hasn't been studied rigorously for the last 60 years. It's really on the last 20, 25 years that people started to look at the importance of the mitochondria to you. And things that can cause oxidative damage to your mitochondria don't necessarily kill them, but they can cause them to stop producing the chemical energy that they tend to give to the rest of our cell.
Okay.
So, if the spike protein can latch on to the outside of a mitochondria near where it normally would be producing the chemical energy, you can stop that process, and that creates the damage to the mitochondria. And in some cases, it's been seen that if mitochondria get damaged that way, that they begin to reproduce uncontrollably. But people used to think that mitochondria were just like simple organelles like any other organelle in your body. Now we're coming to the understanding that they are a true symbiote that lives with us,
that right?
Controls their growth. Yeah. They with every organism that has a nucleus, they have their own DNA, and they shuttle back and forth the proteins that they need for their own reproduction. Comes from outside them, but the materials, and including some of the proteins that we need, like for example the completion of the synthesis of heme in hemoglobin.
Okay.
The mitochondria do that for us. We give each other what we need to live. We cannot live without each other, but in many ways they are an independent life form. So if they're growing
pretty stunning,
like without control, they've suddenly become a bacterial infection.
Wow. That's kind of stunning, actually, just without any talk about nefarious processes by large corporations. That's just kind of a stunning idea.
It's actually, it's a thing when you look at it. It's so perfectly in balance. What they do for their own survival is to help us survive.
Yeah.
And we get along real well because of it.
And that's not unprecedented necessarily. I mean, what is the organism?
Oh, no, it's a widespread motif throughout the living world.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. We live a symbiotic.
Most lichens.
Most what?
Most lichens. You know what a lichen is?
Yes, of course.
The little mushroom thingies that grow on the sides of trees.
Right.
Most of them actually are symbiotes of 3 different organisms living together. They're not one little organism at all.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. Okay, so let me go back to the subject then. Right. So it's a problematic. If nothing else, it's a problem that's large enough that certain companies that are producing this, including one, Pfizer, really need to look into it and to halt the production of whatever product might be tied to the thing. Yes.
Yeah, and I would say that this should be at a government level too. I mean, the claim has been that there is no chemical that can possibly treat this except the vaccine. But there's actually no reason whatsoever to think that that's true.
Yeah.
I was seeing in the Indian Journal of Biomedicine that a very common antibiotic called povidone iodine seems to have a better than 99% effectivity rate in killing this particular virus. And povidone is cheap.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, you can't just go like swallow.
You just knocked it on the nose there, though. The word cheap, inexpensive. And this is something which, increasingly has become a narrative that has gained more voice, is that a lot of this, the government push, the media push, the social push, has all gone back to bolstering up the company to make more money on the backs of people suffering, which is infuriating. I know you watched Neil Oliver, and he certainly pointed to this.
Yes. Well, it is infuriating. It's also picking favorites too, because it's picking that company in favor of all the small people that produce generic povidone or God knows what else. And I would think that with all the doctors in the world willing to try out things based off of their instinct and their best judgment, probably have found several ones that just aren't talked about that are cheap and work well.
But they've all been suppressed.
And I think that's really strange. Normally we were supposed to trust the judgment of doctors.
No. Not. I mean, nowadays that's been called into question. The vaccine efficacy has been called into question. The governmental honesty has been called into major question. I mean, I find myself being so skeptical of all these different institutions that it's kind of hard to. For me, it's kind of hard to navigate to say, well, I'm just going to do this because that's what people do. It's just not that way anymore. And honestly, even down to the masks and the whole COVID show that we did, the whole.
You're not talking about the cat. You're not talking about the cat mask, are you?
Yeah, well, no, I'm talking about the clinical mask that we all said we had to wear, and we had to save grandma from dying by wearing our masks, that whole business, and the little stickers on the floor, stand 6 feet apart, and cleaning our hands all the time with, all that bullshit, that whole thing.
I actually do think cleaning our hands was a good thing.
Well, I don't disagree with it necessarily, but if, this idea that somehow we're all going to be saved if we just constantly lave our bodies in disinfectant.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. Actually, I just that part just quite funny. It's the one change that they were recommending that I actually did think was a very good idea. Everything else I thought was garbage.
Well, it raises a question for me too, though, Cardinal, because I wonder how much of that was a plandemic that. I don't mean that the virus was necessarily a planned thing. I think the virus. It probably was what it now seems to be is an escaped weapon from a lab in a certain Oriental country. It seems to me that's exactly what it was. But the whole capitalizing on it, I wonder if it wasn't all a lead up to the release of the jab, in order that the profits be higher. If you've got people doing all the show to allegedly protect themselves, you have mask companies and sanitization companies and et cetera companies making profit from it, but it's also leading people into thinking, oh my gosh, we need a drug, we need something, a savior to bring us, this is horrible, everybody's dying and bodies are piling up, blah, blah, blah. And then along comes the vaccine, and yay, it's a savior, we'll take it, and no questions asked. And I wonder if that wasn't part of the whole thing. That the two are connected, do you know what I mean?
You mean like the culture of fear that came throughout 2020?
Yes, precisely.
In a way, part of an advertising campaign?
Precisely.
Once upon a time, I would have said that was the stupidest conspiracy in the world.
And now?
These days, sounds pretty plausible. You did that to yourself. I beat you by non-violence.
It was intentional, actually. Nice. Yes, it seems to me.
I like the cafe here.
It's a nice place. They serve good cappuccinos here, and the steaks are to die for. But at one time that would have seemed as implausible as a leader of the free world secreting documents away into his garage and not telling anybody about it until 7 years after the fact. That would be implausible.
Yet, these days, it's not only plausible, it seems to have been happening for quite a while, not just for one leader, but for a lot of them.
It would be as implausible as the leader of the free world continuing to send large amounts of gear and weapons to a country that is doomed to be taken over by the powerhouse of the East, and thus drawing the free nations of the world into a third world war. That would seem implausible.
I mean, how cavalierly, if we can use this word again, some people are plunging towards the notion that we might want a war with Russia.
Oh my gosh. That's like the last thing on earth.
Yeah, we definitely don't want war.
No, thank you. I vote no war.
Talk our way out of this?
Something.
Talk our way out of the problem with the nuclear power?
I guess what I'm getting at is that I'm of a certain age now. I never thought I'd see certain things, and what I am seeing around me right now is things that I thought were utterly implausible at one point. No, we're never going to go to war with Russia. We're never going to have a nuclear war. We're never going to have a scandal so huge that it would be almost unbelievable in the presidency. We're never going to have a pandemic. We're never going to have the drug companies do again what they did back in the 1950s to pregnant women, and their unborn babies. That's just not going to happen again.
Talking about the thalidomide.
Thalidomide, right, thalidomide. Which, by the way, for if anybody does end up watching this video, thalidomide, look it up. It's horrendous. It was something that was supposed to
have it on this channel before I leave.
What's that?
Didn't we talk about thalidomide?
We did talk about it once, yes. And it was one of those things where you think, I can't believe that the drug companies got away with it. I can't believe that they did it in such a horrendous manner, and they should never be allowed to do it again. Well, guess what?
They're doing it again.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe.
Sorry.
Maybe profit is a motive.
Yeah. Yes, and I can't blame capitalism entirely, because some people say, oh, it's capitalism, but I can blame the rampant greed and capitalism that completely destroys any kind of safety valves.
It bothers me that people...
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. You're breaking up. I want to hear what bothers you, so say it again.
I said it bothers me that term for what it was. If you're profit because the government has protected you against all competition or consequences, that is not the way the capitalist system works.
No, it isn't. And actually, that's saying protection. I don't know what it. What would be the term? There's got to be a term to it, but I'm not sure what it is. But that's the same thing that happened with the car industry, of course, and several other industries that were propped up by the government. By the way, your connection is bad, and so I'm missing every third word. Should we go back up onto a roof somewhere, maybe? Would that help? Not so many moving parts.
See if I can call the helicopter.
Yeah.
It could be because we've got all these little people down here. It's called a helicopter again.
Yeah. Up there on the roof, there's less interference. Up on the roof.
Where's the helicopter?
On the roof. Maybe it's going to land on the train. Oh, I hear it.
Where are they?
Here it is. On the roof, the only place I know. Come on, land your helicopter already. Where you just have... Come this way. To make it so... Gotta find an empty place where you can land the damn thing. Why don't you go up on the roof? This is a musical interlude.
Oh, man, they're going over this. Come on, one more.
Don't land on that.
I'm thinking about landing on that.
I keep forgetting I don't have superpowers.
Sorry.
No, it's just funny.
It's the real world, Will. You don't.
You don't have superpowers in the real world. No, it's just funny because in the other game you run really fast and you knock over everything in your path, and you aside from flying, you can do all these amazing things. So.
What's it going to take to get this thing to actually land?
I don't know. It's really annoying. Maybe I should shoot it down and call another one. Land already, you dope.
Call for VTOL.
Oh my gosh. I don't think you can call for anything after you knock it down, so maybe not. Hang on a second. Here we go. Okay, so while we're waiting for this idiot to do his job, let's talk about those documents. What do you make of that?
Sorry, which documents are we talking about right now?
These are the documents that our bumbler-in-chief had inside of his garage, apparently.
Oh, those ones.
Yeah.
They're only classified top secret, Will. I mean, come on. Everybody has a few of those lying around, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I discovered that Sonny Phil had a few of them inside his den.
Yes, he did, didn't he? Here, come on. Oh, did you destroy it? Okay, yeah, you destroyed it. Now we got to find out.
So why don't you call us? Let me know.
Nah, we just got to find a way up onto the Saints headquarters. So it's right around the corner. But
all right.
it has been said by certain people, Victor Hansen and others, that this may be on the level of a Watergate, even worse.
Because it depends on what's in those documents, doesn't it?
Well, certainly it does, but that's not being revealed at all. And the fact that they've been declassified for over 7 years, and this is the thing that kind of gets me in the gut. What's that?
They haven't been declassified. I thought they were still top secret.
They are. Some of them are declassified, and some of them are still not. One way or the other. 7 years. Some of them date back 7 years ago when he was a senator.
Mm-hmm.
and he can't take documents away when you're a senator. That's illegal. And then when you're vice president, you still don't really have the power to do so. It's only when you are president that you're able to actually declassify documents to remove them and take them away. So one way or the other, it's a highly illegal thing that's happened. And nobody knows what their documents are in the documents necessarily, but we may never know. And I don't know. Maybe it's the whole thing is just a big pile of hot air that's being blown around by the right side of the political fence right now. It's no big deal at all, any more than a laptop from Hunter Biden was a big deal, or connections to Ukraine is a big deal. Maybe it's all just a bunch of hoo-ha. And we should focus on the real issues, maybe. But
well, it might be nothing. It might, but I mean, it does bother me anytime something comes out that's connected to what's going on in the world now.
Yes.
We've only heard reports of what the documents had to do with, but some of them had to do with Ukraine from that many years ago, and now this is what's happening now, and it makes you wonder whether or not what's happening now was planned, connected.
Well, now that's a stunning idea.
Was to turn Ukraine into a market owned by 7 major multinational corporations.
Ouch. Maybe.
Had that crossed your mind?
Something like that had crossed my mind. The investment in Ukraine seems highly suspicious, and the involvement of the Biden cartel in the Ukraine, especially the oligarchs, just smacks of criminal activity in general. I honestly don't see what advantage could be gained by our bumbler in chief by poking the Russian bear and getting Russia to take over Ukraine. I can see that. I can see that if he were to, this is going to sound strange, again, if he were to send in troops to push Russia out of Ukraine, which God forbid he ever does, but if he does do that, I can see why he would want to do it, because if Russia does push in there, they're going to seize a great many documents and people that might reveal very distressing things about Mr. Biden's family. So,
I honestly, I don't know. I think there's got to be a simpler way to do it than that, than to engage in war will. But I can see one deciding to start a war because you are connected to one of the companies that was going to rebuild. There's going to be a lot of money in that.
So you think that maybe the idea was to rebuild in Ukraine before Russia invaded?
If I was going to go as far down the rabbit hole as I want to go, I have a weird sensation that this has been being provoked for years, and I say the word provoked. I am no fan of Russia, as you know.
Right.
I'm no
Me
fan
neither.
of Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, no, me neither.
Old ex-KGB. Well,
yeah.
Let me keep my language down there because it's the family channel.
Yes.
I'm not a fan of him at all, but I also do think it's old for some time.
I'm sorry, Ben. Cardinal, you cut out again. I'm sorry. Say that last thing one more time.
I said, can you imagine that maybe we've been pushing to get this result for some time? That the invasion that Russia did of Ukraine last year didn't come out of nowhere. That maybe we really did have bioweapons labs on the border of Russia. Maybe we really did give Russia reason to think we were going to hand over the weapons to retake Crimea. And as much as people think that Crimea is, it's got to be part of Ukraine, it's close to Ukraine, it's not been Ukrainian ever.
No.
It was, Sevastopol was a Russian-founded city at the time of Catherine the Great.
Right.
Russian-speaking, Russian culturally, Russian religiously. So the notion that Crimea would go to the Ukraine is something that Russia would have been willing to go to the mat for, to die for,
It's
rather than let this happen.
kind of like saying that Hawaii actually is part of Japan.
Like, what is actually part of Japan?
Hawaii. You know,
Yes, it would be about equivalent to that.
something like
It would
that.
be equivalent to that.
You don't have a right to it, and you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you also have to imagine as even more emotional than that.
Yeah.
You put that out there as if it's going to become a reality, and sooner or later, Russia would invade. And what if the notion was to have them invade because somebody has to pay for the rebuilding afterwards? Because somebody gets the money out of the armaments in between. Who gets the food contracts coming up next? I think people with long-range view might have gamed this out just in case war ever happened.
Okay, that I don't deny. That I agree with. I think that there are certain parties that run these, for lack of a better word, war games, where they probably work out what would happen if. I don't know whether it's the Biden crime family or not, but they probably have their finger in the pie to some degree.
Sense of them is they're too stupid to be in charge.
Yeah, you know, that's the strange thing, is that both father and son, and in any other Quislings that happen to be, you know, tied by DNA
Brothers,
to them, they all seem to be about as dumb as a pack of hammers. But nevertheless, dumb and criminal sometimes do go hand in hand.
I'm not denying that,
No.
but dumb and criminal overlord don't.
Well, okay, so either somebody was thinking, let's poke the Russian bear and get him to invade, and then afterwards we can sweep up the profits after they pull out in the rebuilding. That's a possibility. The thing that's kind of strange to me is why the Bidens were dicking around in the Ukraine for as long as they were, and then Russia invades. So it's like, didn't you think at all that your screwing around there in Ukraine was going to have some kind of consequence, that there was going to be, you know, you might have not had any recognition that you were playing with fire. But it's a great, honestly, it strikes me as a real analog, a real parallel, parallax or whatever, to this guy sitting in a bar telling his potential gay lover that he was developing a nuclear, weaponized form of the virus. You know, it's the same kind of like idiot.
Just
you know?
that, right? Yeah. Okay. It is, in fact, dumb enough that it could go with the dumb as a bunch of hammers.
I mean, it's possible that there's a criminal mastermind behind this somewhere, but whatever it is not that fellow that passes for the executive branch head. I cannot get my mind around that possibility. I can't even get a possibility around his cocaine-addled and whore-placated son being the guy that's doing it. But I can see. Okay, what I can see is a scenario where trading with the oligarchs of Ukraine, with the idea that Russia just was saber-rattling, they weren't really going to do anything, and then when Russia invades, edging your bets so that if Ukraine did win by mirabile dictu, you would clean up because you were the ally of these oligarchs and they owed you. And if Ukraine lost, maybe you could sweep up afterwards with the rebuilding of a shattered country. I don't know. But again, that couldn't be the guy that sits in the White House or his family. I just cannot swallow that.
Let's not forget that when all this started, February, a year ago, that the United States was very slow to get in on the game.
Yeah, right.
We were behind other countries.
Right. So someone else is either evil masterminding this or hoped to be the evil mastermind of this sort of kerfluffle. I can't see it ending in any other way but a disaster, to be honest. And I was listening to Vic Hansen today on this, and he's normally such a curmudgeon, but I think he was very right on this. This is either going to be a total rout for Ukraine and an embarrassment again for the American military, or somebody's going to be like, hey, we need another route around in order to distract Russia from this invasion. So let's invade them from the north and knock out a few of their facilities there in the north. Well, guess what that means? I mean, that means total war. That means let's engage in a full-scale war. And either way, it's disastrous. It is.
Yeah, that. Oh my God, I can hardly find words to express how stupid I find that.
It is stupid. But here's, I don't see another alternative, because what's America going to do? Be like, oh, oops, our bad, we're out of here. Sorry about that, Russia. Go ahead, take Ukraine. That's not going to happen. Not only because there are monetary investments, obviously, the Biden family's invested monetarily there. I think that there are also connections and documents and evidence that reveals a great deal that if Vladimir can get his hands on it would be completely incriminating to certain parties, not just the Biden crime family, but others as well. Because I don't think he's the only skunk that's been over there to Ukraine. But if that's the case, it's a lose-lose scenario. America has gotten involved in a lose-lose scenario, in my opinion, and we're just getting deeper.
I do see that actually. I think it's grievous that this ever came out in the first place, and it's partially our fault.
Oh yeah,
that Russia invaded in the first place.
I think it is.
We certainly were encouraging of it back in January of a year ago, if you recall.
Yep.
Anytime you're getting into a situation where it becomes a war, not just a little skirmish, but an outright war, is always going to end in misery. I mean, there's not a happy ending to wars.
Yes, and certainly there's no happy ending, certainly in the situation that we find ourselves in with the current military either, because our current military is not the same beast it was even back during the Gulf War.
No, it's not. I do wonder, too, whether or not our current military was doing the same heinous things that the British, was it 72nd Regiment, was doing, spying on their own people. It grieves me to think that our military might have been doing this, too. Had you seen that, by the way?
I had not. What is that all about, aside from the usual heinousness?
The 72nd usually does espionage or spying on enemies of Great Britain. But throughout the great COVID lockdown, they were spying on anyone from Britain who was critical of the government instead.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time that these major Western governments have misused these powers. I mean, the FBI, the CIA, MI6, these all have been used, and it's become quite obvious that they've been used for oligarchic purposes here in the West.
Yeah, the FBI certainly has its history of that, which grieves me because I know so many good men who work in the FBI.
Oh, sure,
really dedicated towards public justice.
Well,
and then the ones who are on top are the ones who are like addicted to power like a drug.
Yeah. I asked a friend of mine who was in the military about this situation. I said, is this just about career advancement? And he said, no, he doesn't think so. He thinks that it's about the fact that people that get into these positions get into them frequently by knowing somebody or being part of a network, and that frequently this network has gotten increasingly more woke, PC, whatever you want to call it. They look for certain tendencies. And when you get those tendencies in there, you don't want other people to realize that you can't do your job, that you're not good at your job, that you're incapable of your job. And so in some ways, they use a bluster to get other people to think that they're tougher than they really are. Which I thought, that seems to work.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot in the past. It's happened a lot.
Yeah.
But usually not on such an enormous scale.
Yeah, and honestly, maybe we have been running on a capital, especially in our country, we've been running on a capital that assumes that people in positions of power, military, whatever, actually have a line that they won't cross. That they actually have a sense that there are some things, like Kennedy. Okay, take Kennedy, President Kennedy. The guy was a son of a bitch. There's no way around that. But there was a line he would not cross, and he did stand up to the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he did actually show some backbone when it came to the Vietnam problem too. So it's like there were things that the man wouldn't do, despite the fact that he came from one of the worst families, one of the worst political families in America.
Oh, yes. Nazi-loving father and everything.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, has that line evaporated? Is it? Are we looking at a situation where there are more skunks than there are hound dogs in the military these days? Because I'm with you. I mean, I know people that in the FBI and in the armed forces of various kinds, and people in the medical industry that are good, and all of them, they want what's best for other people. They desire to do what's good and save human lives and the like. But there's no denying that there are also these people that they could give a rip less, as long as they're getting their handle cranked. I don't know. Maybe it is a larger disease, a symptom of a larger disease, which is this disease of recklessness that we talked about in the beginning of all this, which is this sense that you're no consequences for what you do, bolstered by a electronic world that assures you you're the best thing since sliced toast, Maybe.
Yes. Constantly telling you how wonderful you are and your ideas are always good.
And
gives you the notion that you could jump off the edge of this building and not be hurt.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, it gives you the idea, for instance, that you're owed something.
In the game, it's true, but in real life, that doesn't happen.
Right. This is not real life. In real life, I wouldn't be wearing a cat head anyway. But it's like you're told from early on. And I was talking with a colleague today about this. We're dealing with 50 years of people being coddled and told that they're the best thing in the world, and wrapped up in bubble wrap so they don't skin their knee on the gymnasium, that kind of thing. And, I wonder if we aren't now seeing the really bad effects of it, not just of that too, but of more than that. Because I was reading an article, I don't know if I sent this to you, but I was reading an article today about how men especially are losing their testosterone. That chemically we have less testosterone. Testosterone is depleting. It's like going down in its levels in men, and that may be due to factors that are somehow beyond our control, in addition to factors that are in our control. So not just are we being pussified and mollycoddled and addicted to electronics, but we also have poisons in the food system, and we have sedentary lifestyles, and we're being told by an entire infrastructure that masculinity is toxic. So it may be that a lot of people with that in mind, and addictions to pornography and things like that also added to it, that people with that in mind are like, screw it. Why should I bother being an honest, upright, powerful man? Why do I bother? When I can make a hell of a lot of money, I can make a hell of a lot of money by investing in whores in the Ukraine.
Or producing bioweapons. That's right. To finance my my hot date to some gay club. Yeah, it's. I don't have a good answer for it. I mean, the fact that something is going very sadly wrong is pretty evident in front of us.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's worse than previous ages, I don't know, but it does feel like it's a bit of a trough in civilization.
Yeah, it does. It does. When they talk about a dark age, it's like this is kind of what it looks like. And I don't feel like I want to get too down on that necessarily, because I tend to find that optimism is a willed choice. And a not Pollyannish optimism, but optimism as in we can get through this, we can recover from this. It is a willed choice, I think. That you...
It's interesting you bring that up. That's a big distinction that people don't see a lot, is that you can perfectly well see that a problem is there and not despair.
Yeah, right.
As opposed to the people that say, oh no, there's no problem, we can invade the Ukraine and nothing will happen. I can throw myself off this building and I'd be just fine.
Yeah, that's recklessness. That's recklessness. That sense that things don't have consequences, that's recklessness.
Yeah. But some people think that that's what optimism is, and it's not.
Yes, and on the other hand, despair is the sense that we're never going to get out of it. There is no hope, and there's no course forward at all, which I think is also, honestly, it's a lie, and it's a cheat for the people that are put in your charge, because all of us have people that are put in our charge we must take care of, either children or brothers and sisters or parents or friends or neighbors or whatever the fuck it is. Pardon me.
Yeah. Anyone that you're interacting in the course of the day, it could be coach at work who need you to not feed their despair that the job is miserable.
Exactly. It's the duty, especially of men, but of women too. But speaking as a man, it's the duty of a man to not spread despair and do whatever you can to help other people see a way forward. And that entails, as a man, that we ourselves don't despair, and that we try to find a way forward, and that we don't become reckless Grendels, Grendelian types.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Which is,
and in that question of despair, it's not your emotions; it's your choice.
It is. Yeah, it's a choice.
I mean, you can feel awful, but you choose to say no.
That's a great point.
I'm going to act that the world. I'm going to act as if the world is the way I already want to shape it to.
Yes. Envision what it could be, and then do what you can in the immediate sphere, the small world in front of you, in order to try and affect that positive change. What is that great poem by Gerard Manley Hopkins, right? Carry on comfort, I'll not despair, feed on thee.
Your memory is so much better than mine on these things.
And he says in there, the heart, something to the effect of, the heart has chasms, fathom deep, hold them cheap, who has not clung there. Right? In other words, Hopkins was well aware that there are deep chasms in the human heart that lead to darkness and despair. But the willed refusal to go down that, and the willed decision to continue grasping those chasms and not just let go and fall into it, I think is an amazing thing. Something that certainly Hopkins recognized. Because we owe it to all those people that are yet to come, too. That are yet to be born. So.
Will you, this is a quotation from a rather good movie, with your life would you bring only death, or in your death can you give life?
Yeah, right. Exactly. So. And it is, honestly, it's a source of great hope for me to see the rebellion against the Dark Empire, so to speak, that has happened, that has transpired in the past 2 or 3 years. Not just people like Jordan Peterson encouraging it and being a sort of prophet for it, but other people like John Campbell, for instance, just this sort of cheeky British, here are the facts. Sorry, but these are the facts. And persisting in the truth.
One of the things that I have enjoyed seeing with that is not just these people who are the leaders, but the resurrection of the notion that people are willing to start distrusting authority again.
Yes.
I've seen, especially since about the late 1990s, this whole notion that you should obey, that you should stay in your line, don't get on the grass.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because of the time that I grew up in, which was a bit more chaotic. But I have never trusted authority. And I'm pleased to see, just these last couple of years, a lot of people starting to question, hey, why are they telling me to keep off the grass?
Yes, right. Right, maybe I shouldn't be drinking the Tang, No, it's an important thing. Even that guy from Helsinki, whatever, that fellow that goes out in the woods and gives little talks. I don't know if you've seen him.
Yes, the guy looks like a big bear.
Yeah. I love him. He's so just matter of fact, but it's just basically, nope, I'm not going to comply. I'm going to go out in the forest, build my little hut, and screw you. It's kind of like that. It's like all these and independent schools cropping up, and independent people online connecting with each other. It's beautiful to see. It's also intense. It's like a really intense time to be alive. And none of us are unaffected by the tragedy of it, because there is a great deal of tragedy and sadness about it. None of us are unaffected by that. but all of us are faced with this decision. Are you going to swallow the tang completely? You're going to buy into this hook, line, and sinker, to mix my metaphors, or are you going to question?
Yeah, fish don't drink tang.
Yeah, right. No, they don't like it. Or are you going to question things? Are you going to say, maybe I should be more cautious? Perhaps the route to health is actually through a religious thought or a religious action of some kind, whether it's the church or not. I mean, because even the church, I mean, questions about that. But
well, I mean, I obey the church. I just don't trust it.
Yeah, right.
Well, you know what I mean, Will.
I do. I'm reading the School of Darkness right now by Bella Dodd, and it's some darn good reading, man. I finished that book by Skousen, The Naked Communist, and that was pretty good. It was a little sensationalist, but boy, was it ever good, just to outline what developed in communism. But now I'm reading Bella Dodd. It's far more narrative. It's far more like a biography, but she's talking about how did the schools in America become communist. And it's really stunning. It's remarkable. They weren't bad-hearted people, but they certainly bought into a really bad idea, and just screwed the thing completely. I mean, the school system was just destroyed by these terrible ideas.
Working
the
school system is that it was never really the teachers that were the problem. The system itself destroys the ones that are doing the job well and upholds the ones that are not.
Yeah, right. I mean,
whereas everywhere else, it's exactly the opposite.
Yeah. What is it that in capitalism, man uses man, but in communism, it's the other way around. That's funny. So, okay. I guess the other thing that I just want to bring up with you is probably superfluous at this point, but it does kind of latch into this. I just want to see what your thought is. Were you able to listen to that podcast I sent your way, the Thomas Sowell podcast? I don't know if you did or not, but
I have listened to quite a number of Thomas Sowell podcasts.
Okay, well,
I don't remember which one.
This one I sent you just when you get the chance. This is called The Genius of Thomas Sowell, and he is a fanboy of Thomas Sowell, basically, but he quotes a great deal of Thomas Sowell. And here he's interviewing a woman who has spoken her mind about how bad things are and gotten a lot of hot water for it. It was a really fascinating interview, but one of the things she was saying, which I have to go back to it because I have to see what exactly she said, but it got me to thinking. Why? Okay, wait, hang on a second. Caveat first. Big caveat. What I'm about to say is going to sound racist. All right? So.
All right.
Why?
And you're talking to a person that was in a mixed race marriage?
Yes, I know.
Ahead,
Nevertheless, why is it almost, I think it's demonstrably true, Asian students do so well in the academic system. Black students don't. Is it nature or is it nurture? Is it both?
Or is it the system that doesn't meet needs properly?
Well, that's really interesting too. The system, when it's not completely screwed up.
I'm actually going to jump on what you said from the very beginning because I want to point out something.
What, this
Blacks
is racist?
in Africa.
Yes.
I'm sure it's racist.
Yes.
Blacks in Africa have no problem with their schooling system.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
It's only in America,
yes.
which suggests to me it's the system that's the problem.
Okay, so I totally agree, and this is why I think it's an interesting idea. I think it's the system. If we say that the system is not completely hosed by a certain political party that begins with com,
all right,
in its best light.
Yeah, you missed it.
The system, as it's set up, is a system which is designed to train people in the truth as Western culture sees it. Now, I agree with it. I think it's a beautiful system in its best light. I think it's a beautiful system. It trains people to be empirical. It trains you to think through logically. It trains you to learn about structure and order and all that kind of business, and honor the past. So I think that's a great system. But what if, two things. What if you were brought up in a culture where that wasn't the case, or where you were brought up with a different way of looking at things? Your culture either would connect with this type of system, this type of learning, or it would not. And that might account for why some groups of people do really well in it and others don't. It might account for it.
Yes, it would.
But what if... Here's the second part of this. Genetically speaking, we have certainly different types of skin and different eyes and all that kind of business, but we also have, genetically speaking, some greater facility with things than, say, another genetic group does. Types of art, types of sports, types of ability to say certain words. It may not be entirely nurture. Maybe some of it is genetic. Maybe some of it is part of the way we are as human beings. Okay, so for instance, I burn terribly in the sun. You know, my skin literally is not built for the sun. Black people, for instance, don't burn as much in the sun. They do, but they don't burn as much.
But in contrast, they suffer from vitamin D deficiency.
Exactly. And sickle cell anemia and other things like that, right. So there are some things we know are genetically enhanced or challenged depending on the genes of the person. And that the genes sometimes are correspondent with what color skin or what facial features or whatever, which we call, since the 19th century, race. So is it possible, or is it complete hooey to suggest that some concepts and some ways of learning are genetically more accessible to some groups and genetically not accessible to other groups? What do you think?
I have followed this since the 1990s when somebody published a book that was called The Bell Curve, which I read the book and I looked at his evidence, and I decided that his evidence was cherry-picked or made up. And
Okay.
About it right there. So it made me very biased against it for a while. As for actual capacities, I do know that you can have genetic differences that will affect your personality very much. And I can see how certain personality traits, do you have a whole bunch of people who have the genetic traits towards more aggression? Well, they're going to survive inside more hostile circumstances.
Yes.
More passive. So it's an advantage in certain circumstances to feel that way.
Right.
But it also is going to alter how you do your problem solving.
Yes.
People that are very aggressive biologically are not going to be thinking holistically about problems. So that's one thing that I think you are going to see go down, if you're going to call it this, racial lines.
Right.
You're going to see modes of thinking that will have been influenced by your culture. In China, the portion of China that grows wheat versus the portion of China that grows rice tracks very strongly with a gene that is strongly associated with the ability to do more cooperative behavior.
That's interesting.
And the fact is, if you're going to be doing rice cultivation, one single person cannot do it correctly. It has to be a communal activity, whereas wheat does not.
That's really interesting. I have heard also, I've also seen or read, I think it was, that Native Americans, for instance, they never developed the enzymes to be able to process dairy because they never had domestic animals. And they also did not, therefore, develop the same enzymes that could process alcohol very well. And that's one of the major reasons that they have problems with it.
Yeah, those are two separate genetic things. Both are true, but they're not connected to
Right.
each other. But they're both true.
Right.
You know,
But I guess my point being is that
it would in fact lead to a weakness if you were exposed to a society that had lots of alcohol. You would not flourish under such circumstances.
Or in a positive light, it has been proven that the Native Americans, the Andean peoples, have a real ability to process. Is it cocaine? I think leaves. Cocaine leaves. I think cocaine leaves.
Coca leaves, yeah.
Coca leaves, yeah. And the coca leaves actually help them to be able to navigate in the high altitudes, so that they can actually function and not just pass out. But that ability to process coca leaves is fine as long as you're doing it in order to function up high in the mountains. People that don't have that ability, coca is cocaine. It destroys them. It just makes them loopy.
That's what I was laughing about. So I was thinking, well, if I had the coca leaves, I'm afraid it would just leave me stoned.
Yeah, or like our Uncle Eli, you have coca and hot water in the morning for your morning drink instead of coffee. Yeah, you know that, right? Yeah.
Well, let's not talk about that one too much, but I have heard about that. Yes,
yeah.
We have some odd ancestors,
to say the least. So let's just to wrap up this bit of the conversation. It really struck me that if there is a genetic as well as a cultural impediment to certain types of learning, it may be that this traditional Western way of learning, which I do love so much, might be more difficult to access for some groups than for others. Maybe.
Well, I agree with you. I honestly have often thought that the cookie cutter style of learning that we have, no, cookie cutter is not the right word. Militaristic style of learning that we have done for the last 100 years in America, but we didn't do it before that point.
Nope.
I don't think it serves everybody very well.
I totally agree on that.
It is a militaristic style, and there are a lot of people who do not respond well to that approach to learning.
Yeah, no. And if I understand it right, that militaristic style was actually developed by the Germans in the 19th century because of factory workers.
Yes. You're up on your history about that.
Yeah, and a lot of it was in order not just to get a populace that would be able to go from school to factory very easily because they were already predisposed to it, but also was there in order that the children could attend the school while their parents worked because of the time thing, and also to lead into the very powerful German military that developed from it.
Yes.
But when it came to America, Americans basically adopted that style because it fit well not only with our factories but also with our being able to create a citizenry that could vote well in America. That's my understanding of it. So yes, a militarist.
I do think that when it was originally imposed, and I do say imposed here in America, it was with this intention to shape the populace so that they would be more useful to our state.
Yeah.
And that was very different from the education which led to greater liberty, which was from before that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I also just going to point out as a historical thing, didn't Japan copy not the German military system, but the American system as it was in the 1850s?
Yes, that's true.
I think they did.
Partly because of Commander Perry's opening of Japan. We had the most influence on them. So kind of startling.
I think Japan at the time was also picked the education system that they saw worked the best in the entire world.
Yep.
Which was a very cultural thing for Japan to do.
Yeah, it was. And so their style now is very factory. All the children.
No. Their style is not. Their style is far more intense than our present style, but it's not the factory style actually.
Please go on.
Well, I'm not sure how far I want to go on this, but the thing that they're going for is not conformity in Japan, although they do that with like uniforms and haircuts and so forth. But it's for competition for excellence is what they seek in Japan with their educational system.
Okay.
but not necessarily with the notion that everybody is going to wind up with the ability to go towards the officer level. You don't go to the grades to see that you're more superior in
Okay.
Japan.
Okay. I'm tracking with you so far.
Well, I don't really have much else to say about it except that they haven't changed their system to innovate beyond what was already obviously working.
Yeah, right.
And our system abandoned what was working in order to innovate for things that didn't work.
Well,
And it would have been fine if they selected against the things that didn't work, but they didn't.
Well, we have 3 phases of our education. Well, no, 4 phases of our education, okay, in America. The first phase is of especially the wealthy children, having an elite, almost aristocratic style of education that led to people like Thomas Jefferson and the like. And that was sort of an Enlightenment style of education. It wasn't universal, and it wasn't for the stupid. It was for the wealthy kids and for those who were really apt for that type of education. And that was the first phase. And yes, it did produce great men, especially, but it wasn't universal, and so that was not there. But then there was that turnaround where we went into that second phase of our educational system as we expanded westward, and we adopted a much more factory-oriented style of doing things, roughly around the 1860s or 70s. And Diane Ravitch covers this pretty well in her book Left Back. That second phase did pretty well for us as we were expanding as a nation, and creating little kids that were capable of entering into factories, but also entering into American life. And we did encourage competition in those types of schools. So it was fairly successful. It was also really good because kids were learning substantial material and committing it to memory. And a great deal of those schools, especially in the Midwest, were primarily just the memorization of material. And then you had the phase, and sorry to back up, and they would actually stand in front of people and recite all this ream of material, and that was their graduation exam. It wasn't a written thing. It was like, can you tell your community the name of every president so far? Can you tell the name of your community all of the Caesars in ancient Rome? And yay, you graduated. So it was very performative, and it was sort of like showing greatness through competition. But it was also designed so that anybody could do it if they applied themselves. So it wasn't just the very rich. Then the third phase was after John Dewey, a curse be upon his name. John Dewey decided that not only was this style just repetitive and monotonous and didn't give true understanding, but that it also did not appeal to everybody, because you had people that could do it and then you had dolts. So Dewey entered into all these other things to be studied and began to bring in things like shop class and mechanics and sociology and that all these different things that people could study in high schools and also grammar schools. And that was our third phase, and that really started to cause problems because teachers were pulled in all these different ways. A really good book on that one is Madly Teach by Mortimer Smith. Really good text.
I know this book.
Yeah, and then there's the fourth phase. And the fourth phase was, let's use the schools for indoctrination purposes, starting in the 1960s. And this is what Belladonna is showing me now, is that this was probably, 50s was where it started to take place, but really it was the 60s that it took off. And that's what we're dealing with now, are schools that are primarily designed to make groupthink.
We had a couple of years of that in our schools that I actually do remember when we were young. I won't mention names of former teachers,
right.
But I remember getting that in some of my classes.
Yep.
Not so much in others. Others I actually was learning stuff. But in some it was, you need to think the right way.
Yeah, right.
And
which
they
is odd.
Coded it with you're special, you're smarter than everyone else.
Which is odd too, Cardinal, because I wonder whether or not those same schools were the schools that were also being innovative, and hanging bananas from the walls and things like that. It was odd. It was weird. I sometimes wonder with my own autistic tendencies, my ADHD tendencies, because I recognize now that I had them when I was younger, especially, whether or not that wasn't appealing to me. I don't know if I would have survived in a 19th century style school, so to speak, or even in a John Dewey school. I think that in some ways the loft where you could go up and read among the pillows, or the art hanging from the ceiling, or the get-togethers on a regular basis to tell each other how great we were. I think that somehow appealed to my young self, because I wasn't learning rigid material. It also meant that I didn't know how to do math until I got into high school. And even there, it was a struggle. I knew no science. My history was very shoddy by the time I got to high school. And I struggled with that immensely. When I went into Catholic school in 7th grade, it's like I didn't know diddly squat, especially compared to the kids I was with.
I think the 19th century schools would have actually been okay for you. I mean, if Nikola Tesla did well through them, you would.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
And God knows he had ADHD.
Yeah, right, exactly. Exactly.
But the other one that we got, I think it set us back by several years, both you and I.
Yeah.
And I mean, I may be an extraordinarily good chemist these days, but I'd had none by the time I got to college, for example.
Wow, really?
No, I got into college and I became a chemist with no prior experience in it whatsoever.
Wow.
I was always kind of gifted in mathematics, but I'd never had any experience with science.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's...
And they didn't make me do it either.
They didn't make you do it?
When I was in grade school, I wasn't forced to memorize addition, subtraction, multiplication. They certainly never made me memorize logarithms, which these days, I realized if I had been able to memorize my logarithms tables, I could do certain branches of mathematics just by intuitive feeling alone. I would be able to get to the solution I wanted to do if I had memorized logarithm tables.
Well, see, that's interesting to me, because I know the same thing could be said to me if I had been forced to memorize history or mathematics or, goddammit, anything, because I wasn't. Which is lounging around on pillows was our ideal education system. But it does, going back to this other question, it does help me to broaden what I'm thinking about. I think that there probably are genetic propensities in every human being as an individual, probably running in families, that can either help or hinder in certain aspects of education. But when you take that and then you put it into an environment that is looking for only one thing, you kind of have a recipe for disaster. Like you mentioned Nikola Tesla. They were looking for one thing with Tesla. Tesla couldn't produce that one thing, so he was a dope, right? Einstein was something too.
These days, we look back on Tesla as an absolute genius.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, right. But part of that's because I think as an adult, as you were mentioning, as an adult, he recognized what he was lacking, and he did his best to fix all that. And his thinking outside the box allowed him then to be much more innovative than the run-of-the-mill person who was just doing the same old damn thing because that's what he profited from. So it may be that whatever genetic propensity there is, even if it is a genetic propensity that runs only in a certain group of people, a certain race or a certain group of people, that genetic propensity in the right environment will do smashingly well.
But the wrong environment will hold you back.
Yes, exactly. Which is, and since we can't affect change of the genetics yet,
God help us. But of course, certain companies that's around like Pfizer probably are attempting to do exactly that.
Could download karate into our head.
A virus that's going to make you capable of processing mathematics, but only if you pay for the constant.
Yeah, right. That's the thing. That occurred to me as a side note here. If, for instance, they were doing something that was going to genetically alter human beings, and even alter human beings for the better, who would be the people doing that? It wouldn't be the average slob. It's got to be somebody with a ton of money, and they would charge that, and they'd get paid that. And then you get a gulf between the children of the rich and the children of every other schmo. Because the children of the rich will be the ones who get the jab or whatever it is, get the pill that allows them to become these super geniuses. Did you ever see the movie Unlimited? I think it was called Limitless.
Yes.
Great movie.
Actually.
That was a great movie.
Yeah.
But it's very much along that lines. Who is going to profit from this little blue pill? Well, it's not going to be your dope that sits in his apartment unwashed.
It's going to be the very wealthy. And yet, on the other side, just as a question of history in the world, what you think is good isn't after a certain point of time.
No.
Did we discuss on this channel the thing about the Scottish immunity to bacterial diseases, the resistance?
No.
All right, this is a little quirk of history about our race, so to speak. So, in general, Scottish people are more... Did you not notice? Oh.
I'm definitely Scottish. You could tell by my teeth.
But in general, Scottish people are actually slightly more resistant to bacterial infection.
Really?
Of certain bacteria than other races. And it has to do with something that happened at the time of the Black Death.
Okay, that's interesting.
There is a protein you have its function is to bring sugar into your cells right there. And there were two different variations of this protein running around in Scotland. A very good working version that goes well and you're very healthy if you got it. And a somewhat more defective version of it, which if you happen to have this version, you're much more likely to have pressure, heart disease later on.
Wow.
Tend to be a little bit overweight. Well, as case would happen, the Black Death, that bacterium, Yersinia pestis, hijacks this protein in order to get inside and feed off your cells.
Huh.
But it only could use the good copy of the protein. So you see, in Scotland, virtually everyone that had the good working copy of it died.
Wow.
And the ones that lived are the ones that the bacteria can't infect. But for the same reason, we have a propensity towards high blood pressure and heart disease. So what you think is good may not be good.
Yeah. That's really amazing, actually. That's truly amazing.
Yeah.
I mean,
the same thing applies with sickle cell anemia. If you and I went to the jungles of the Congo, we'd die very quickly.
Yes.
But a person's got one copy of the sickle cell gene is virtually immune to the disease.
Yep. Yeah, that's truly amazing. I mean, the example I was thinking when you talked about that was how the interbreeding that happened in Mesoamerican royalty.
Oh yeah. Talk about that.
Well, Mesoamerican royalty interbred. They were like the Egyptians. Yeah. You married your sisters, and yeah, I know. Consequently, as anybody who talks about this knows, that increased any genetic weaknesses and decreased any genetic strengths. Because after a while, the strains, tend to filter that out. So by the time that actually Europeans arrived, the majority of royalty in Mesoamerica, Aztecs and were really in a bad way. They had a lot of genetic problems. There was I think it was a thing with their teeth, where their teeth were messed up because of this, and their skulls were oddly shaped because of it too, if I'm not mistaken. And they certainly know now too that their skulls apparently were depleted because of their diet, their thinness of their bones, because they were eating mostly just maize. But I won't say they were retarded. That's not a good word to use. But the shall we say they were challenged? The royalty in the Aztec Empire was greatly challenged by genetic problems, and they thought that the interbreeding was a good thing because, of course, you preserve the blood of the kings and all that. But apparently, that's not true.
Yeah.
So
I think the lesson through all of this is what you think of as wisdom may not be so wise.
Yeah, right. Maybe you're not so smart. Or as I remember from a comic book, someone said, "For somebody so smart, you sure am dumb."
Dumb. I remember that. Well, it
God.
would make me fear anybody that decides they know what is best for
Yes,
all of
that's a
humankind.
great point. That's a great point. This is another point of my current skepticism, and I think the skepticism of a lot of people, to give over our own rational thought to our betters. You know, those who are supposedly the people that are supposed to know. That's come under a lot of doubt has been cast upon the efficacy of that course.
Thank God.
Thank God, yes, exactly. So that in some ways gives me great hope, because it's like the true American spirit, the true human spirit, but the true American spirit is one of independence, really, and one of self-determination, you know,
Yes.
which has its flaws.
And the notion that we don't have betters in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, how about that? What other problem do we have to solve?
On that note, I think we may actually have to bring this to a close at this particular point.
I think you're right.
Biology is telling me that I'm going to have to take a break.
Yeah, I have to go take a leak. And I do have to have some supper, so at some point. So
oh yeah, that too, because otherwise you'll starve to death.
Apparently,
it's been a real pleasure talking to you on the building tonight.
Always a pleasure to talk with you, it really is. And happy Groundhog Day. I hear Punxsutawney Phil is still alive, even though the Canadian version bit the dust.
Well, you know, the Canadian version killed him through the medically assisted MAID system, medically assisted death, or whatever they're calling it.
Yeah. Hey! I was going to knock you off the building. Okay, here I come. I'll get you. I'll save you. Oh, you're not dead. Good.
No, I seem to be okay.
I love this game.
Oh, ow!
Why doesn't it hurt you?
Hey, what's that cop getting a dwarf business for?
Where?
That cop right there.
Son of a gun. All right, so until we actually come up with something else to talk about, because I think we depleted everything.
Don't worry, I'm sure there'll be an interesting week coming up.
You bet. I hope no files are found in your garage, and God bless you and keep you.
And you as well. God bless.